Hello and welcome to part 2 of this tutorial. If you haven't watched the first video, I highly recommend you do that, or nothing in this video is going to work. Okay, so now that we've got the connecting part situated, we need to make some UI so that we can actually connect. So I'm going to make a script called Game Manager, and I'm going to attach it to a game object, also called Game Manager. Okay, so let's open it up and start by making this a static instance. In our awake method, we'll do a standard, if it already exists, get rid of it. Alright, now I like to make some standard variables that we can pull from another script later. I know this stuff was written in, but it can be useful later on in your game if you want to use something like this. So I'm doing it just for additional purposes, I guess. So I'm going to start out by making some functions, one for host created and one for connected as a client. Also going to do one for disconnecting, which is a fun word to type. And then we're also going to do one for quit. Alright, I'm going to head back into Unity. I'm going to make a new button. I'm going to go ahead and rename it to exit. I'm going to size it up and throw it in the top corner. Then for the button, we're going to drag it in our game manager, and we're going to... Alright, so what I'm doing now is I am duplicating my multi-menu and I'm making it into a multi-lobby. So this is the lobby that you're going to see once you actually start a host or join a host. So I'm going to take one of the buttons and rename it to disconnect. And I'm going to move it slightly down so you don't accidentally double tap. And for this button, on the click, we're going to go ahead and drag our network manager in there, and we're going to call the disconnect function. And real quick, I'm just going to tidy up. I forgot to center these earlier. Okay, so back in our game manager script, I'm going to go ahead and do a serialized field and make a reference to our two menus that we just made. And down in our functions, we can go ahead and set them true or false depending on how we want our buttons to work. So for the host and client, as we join it, we want our main menu to turn off and our lobby to turn on. And then as we disconnect, we want the opposite of that. I also threw in the host and connected variables and just updated them accordingly. Now back in the game network manager script, I'm going to go ahead and update the client ID for game manager. This is something that I like to do when working with a previous infrastructure. It was better to have a lot of these iterations places so that you can easily get access to them. So in our disconnect script, we need to call the game manager's disconnect. This will again just do our UI stuff. In the lobby joined, we're going to do the client connect, and in the server callback, we're going to do the host connect. And in game manager, we'll go ahead and throw in our references for the menus. And I'm just going to do a quick test to make sure that everything's functioning before we move forward. Create host takes me here. You can see all the callbacks, and then disconnect will take me back to the main menu. In our game manager script, we'll add two references for game objects. One's going to be the chat panel, and another one's going to be a text object that we'll make later. Then we need to add an input field using TMP Pro. Then we're going to make another field, and we're going to do an int for max messages. Okay, below our variables, let's go ahead and make a public class called message. And this is going to contain some information that we need for the chat box. Now with that class done, we can make a private list of messages, and we'll just call it message list. So with our references done, I'm going to go back in Unity, and in the lobby, I'm going to make a scroll view. I'm going to size it up, put it down towards the corner, so it's a little out of the way, more conventional. And we'll do movement type clamped. And we'll take rid of the horizontal movement. And for visibility, let's change that to permanent. So in the viewport, let's go ahead and set the image to none. And I'll anchor it to the bottom left. Now I'm just going to spend some time resizing it and make sure that our viewport is just a little off the bottom and a little off the left so the words don't go straight through it. Now under the content, let's go ahead and make a vertical layout group, and we'll also add a size fitter. Let's change the child alignment to lower left and the vertical fit to preferred size. And before we go, let's just make sure that it's anchored to the right place and stretched to the bottom. And for the background, I'm just going to change the color to make it a little bit more appealing. Now for the words, let's just drop a UI text in the content. Go ahead and change that to whatever size you want. And we'll drop it into a newly created prefabs folder so that we can reference it later. And delete it from the scene. Now that we've created our game objects, we can go into the game manager script and start plopping in our references. So the content, it's going to be the chat panel. And we need to make an input field to throw in there. And I totally didn't forget, but I'll resize it now. So upon review, I realized I put all these below the awake method. I'm just going to go ahead and change that. All right, so now I'm going to go call update, because now we're going to start asking questions about the input field. It's going to be based around enter. Essentially, if the input field is nothing and you hit enter, it's going to activate it. If you hit enter, it's going to deactivate it, and it's going to do that by throwing a space in there and reading if that space exists and reverting it if it doesn't. If there's actual text, we're going to send a message, and we'll do that a little bit later, because we don't have that functionality put in quite yet. Alright, let's make a public method for sending message to chat. This is going to take in a string, a ulong, and a bool. So if our message list count is greater than our max messages, let's go ahead and destroy the game object. And we'll also remove it from the list. Okay, so here we'll make a new message to store the information of what we just got handed. Okay, so we're just going to set the name to server. We'll come back and adjust that later depending on if the server actually sent it. For now, we'll just put the message as the name and the text that we're given. Then we need to actually make the text object, and then we'll add it to our list, and we will throw it in to the text field. Now, along with the chat box, we're going to make a method for clearing the chat box, and this is if you leave and you come back, you don't want your messages from the old lobby, so we're just going to clear the message list, and we're going to make a for each reference, finding these chat boxes with a tag that we need to put in later, and we're just going to cycle through every single object that it grabs and destroy it. Now, before I forget, let's just go ahead and make our tag. And make sure you don't get the spelling wrong on this or it won't find it. So we'll make the tag, go and set it. Okay, so with the chat mostly done, let's go ahead and put in a dictionary, and this is going to be used to keep track of the players who join the game. So it's going to be a ulong and a game object. We're going to keep track of them through their client ID, and then the game object through the player info is going to keep track of their Steam ID and their Steam name. So back in Unity, I'm going to put an empty game object in, and this is going to act as our parent object for our player fields or player boxes, whatever you want to call them. I'm adding a vertical layout group to the object so that it will stack the names as they come in. Now inside that, I'm going to make another empty, and we're just going to call this player card. So when a player joins, this is what's going to be instantiated and created inside of this player field box. So I'm just going to set up the text how I like. We're going to set up an image. I'm going to make it green. This is going to be used as the ready up image for now. Super high tech stuff here. And I'm just going to do a little bit of editing, getting everything working right, fit it, looking somewhat decent. And once you're happy with that, let's just drag it down to our prefabs folder and delete it from the scene. And with those two game objects made in the editor, we need to go back to Game Manager and put a reference to them. So player field box and the player card prefab, and we can just do it as game objects. In the editor, let's go ahead and drag in our references. Now to complete this prefab, we're going to make another script. I'm going to call it the player info script, and we're just going to use this to hold the references that we're getting from the lobby callback and keep track of our players. So use the TMP so that we can access text. So here I'm going to make a private text for the player name. Then we're going to make a Steam name string and a ulong for the Steam ID, put a game object in for that ready image, and a bool for isReady. So in the start method, we're going to make the ready image false, and we're going to make the player name equal to the Steam name. Now to tie this whole thing together, we need one more script, and I'm going to name this the network transmission script. This is going to be what contains all of our information coming in and out. And like the rest of them, we're going to make a game object and attach the script to that game object. So for this one, we're going to need to add a component, and we're going to need to add a network object. This is so that we can gain access to the netcode. Instead of going from mono behavior, we're going to be taking from the network behavior. I'm going to get rid of all the basic stuff, and we're just going to make another singleton the same way we did the last ones. Alright, so in this script, we're going to hold all of our server and client RPCs. I just like to put required ownership false. I don't think you have to, but I do it. We're going to do a wish to send a chat, and remember on your naming conventions, you have to end them in server RPC along with client RPC. It has to end with client RPC. Okay, so the server RPC is when a client wants to send a message, and then the client RPC is when the server sends that message to all who are attached to the host. So in the client's just going to call the game managers, send a chat, and it's going to take in the message that we got from the server RPC, which is literally just going to call the client RPC. It might be a little confusing at first, but your client's going to send this message to the server, and the server's going to bounce it back to all the clients, and then that's how they get the message. Okay, so here I'm going to add a client to server request to add the client to the server dictionary. So the server's going to handle all of the game knowledge for the players. The players are just going to have a copy essentially of the server dictionary, and this is how that information is going to get handled. So it's going to be sent the Steam ID, the Steam client name, and the client ID. I'm just going to leave a note for things that we need to do later, because this is also going to go back to the game manager and add all of the dictionary input and all that shenanigans. And along with adding, we also need removing. So this is going to be a server RPC, which is going to be essentially mirroring and sending all this information out through the client RPC. You might be wondering why it doesn't just trigger a client RPC to begin with. I guess you could go down that route. I prefer this method of the host only getting it from the callbacks, sending it to everybody else. It's just a step in line to where you can have some server influence over a message before the clients get it. So under that one, we're going to do another client RPC, and we're going to update client player info. This is going to be the message to all the clients that actually update their dictionaries. So that's given all of the information that we need for a player, and I'll finish it with a little message so we can update it later. So now with the dictionary stuff, let's go ahead and make another call and response. This is going to be for the client readying up system. When a client does press the button, it's going to send to the server, and then the server is going to tell everybody if that guy is ready or not. Since we've already made this game object, we can go ahead and look for it in the game manager dictionary with a for each, looking through all of it to find if the client ID matches the player key. And if it does, we're going to use the bool that we get in this method to update its ready and the ready image. Here in the game manager on the disconnect function, we're going to go ahead and clear the player info, and we're also going to start getting rid of all of the player cards that were in the lobby. We need them out when we disconnect and go back to the main menu. Okay, below that, now I'm going to start our functions for adding people to the dictionary. We're going to take in the three big ones, the ulong for client ID, the string for Steam name, and a ulong for the Steam ID. Then we're going to check the dictionary to make sure it doesn't already contain one. And I'm going to create a new player info object, just name it Pi. It's going to be an instantiated player card prefab. That's the thing we made in the UI. And we're going to grab the player info script off of it, and we're going to update its information according to what we got passed in the function. So back in our send info to client RPC, we can add the game manager function that we just made, the add to dictionary with the information passed along. Then head back to the game manager script. Now we'll put in the update client function, and what this is going to do is it's going to loop through our entire dictionary, and it's going to send a message if a object or a dictionary entry exists, and it's going to send that to all the clients. So by doing it this way, you're able to update multiple players at once. So if somebody joins the lobby late and there's 3 players in there, they're going to get all 3 of those players added to their dictionary. So under that, I'm going to add the remove player from dictionary, and you guessed it, it's going to remove a player from the dictionary. And this is going to take in a Steam ID since it's being called from the on lobby disconnect. So we're going to loop through this dictionary again, and if we find one that equals the Steam ID, we're going to go ahead and update the value and the key. So outside the for each, we can delete it. So with those game manager functions created, we can go back into our network transmission script and start entering in where they need to be. Alright, now to make the ready button, let's go ahead and make some private game objects, references. We need a ready button and a not ready button, and we also need a start button. Still in the game manager script, I'm going to make a function to ready up or not ready up. It's going to do both. This function is just going to take in a bool, and it's going to send it to the client ready server RPC with the client ID attached to it. Then underneath, we need another function to check if the players in our lobby are actually ready. So this just goes through the dictionary that we have on our client side, and it just checks each value and makes sure that the players are ready, actually show the ready box, and the players aren't, it'll turn off that ready box. And we have it return a bool only for the host to activate the start game button. Back in Unity, we can go ahead and make those buttons. So I'm just going to make a simple button. I'm going to call it ready, and then I'm going to duplicate it and call another one not ready. Of course, with each of these buttons, we need to, on the click, go ahead and drag our game manager down so we can call the function ready. And for the ready, we're just going to check it so it returns true. And then for the not ready button, we're going to uncheck it so it returns a false. Again, I'm going to duplicate one of these buttons, and this is just going to be the start game button. I'm going to drag it out to the middle of the screen, and that's going to be it. It's just there for show right now because it doesn't actually do anything. So with your buttons made and you're happy with them, go back into the game manager script, and let's go ahead and insert our references. And to finalize it, we need to go back into our ready and not ready buttons and add 2 more clicks. One's for the button, one's for the other button, and we're going to do this on both of them. They essentially turn each other off. So if you hit ready, it's going to turn it off, and then turn the not ready button on, and vice versa. Alright, so back in our network transmission script, we need to go ahead and plug in these holes. We've got the client ready server ready to be called, and then if that is the host, we're going to check all of the players are ready. Now in the game network manager, on a few of these callbacks, I'm just going to add send to chats. These are things like player is in the game, people are joining the game, yada yada yada. It just sends it to the chat bar so that all the clients can figure it out. And we're going to do true on the bool, so that means that the server is sending it and it's not from an actual player. Here on the on lobby member leaves, remember we got to send to the server that a member has left, so it's basically sending it to itself. But again, this is so that the server can do a check before it updates the clients. So on lobby created, when the host actually makes it, he needs to add himself to the dictionary, and this is what this call is going to do. All right, so in our netcode callbacks, on the client disconnect callback, we want to unsubscribe from itself, essentially, and we're going to call the disconnect so that cycles through and cleans everything up for us. On the client connected callback, we're going to ask the host to add me to the dictionary, and then we are going to update our client ID with the client ID that we get in the callback, and we're also going to trigger a is ready or is the player ready, and this will update the client as they connects with the other player statuses. So here in the game manager, we want to go to the update and fix some code I entered in before. Apparently I didn't have that return button there. Get rid of that, and where it says send, we want to add the function for what we just made previously, which is the I wish to send a chat to server RPC, and then we'll just throw in the text from the field. Another item to clean up is the send message to chat. We need to make sure that we decipher whether or not it's from the client, and since we have this information now being passed to us in the dictionary, we can go ahead and figure out who sent it by grabbing the information off of their player info script. Here in the disconnect, we're going to add the clear chat, just so when you do disconnect, it clears the little chat box. And the last things we need to do is go into this player card prefab. I need to make the tag player card so it actually finds it. And then we need to go into its script and we need to add its references. And after that very long-winded tutorial, we can finally hit the play button. Here I'm going to just create a host for my fake Steam name, and I'm going to have a friend outside join it. It's going to show up in chat along with creating his player field box. I can ready up, he can ready up, and the start button appears. Alright, thanks for sticking around, folks. That should be the most basic way of doing it. So everything's here, ready for you to add on to it. I wish you the best of luck. Feel free to subscribe on your way out, and have a good day.